All right, everyone. Hi, my name is Adam from Pactimo. I'm joined today with James Fitzgerald that you guys met earlier, and also Lynne Tolman. She's the president of the Major Taylor Association. So thank you so much to both of you for joining, especially Lynn, who will be sharing with us a little bit about the history of Major Taylor, the association, and the goals that they have, which are pretty awesome. So thank you both.
Thanks, Adam. I really appreciate it. And Lynn, it's finally it's great to finally put a face with your voice. So it's a pleasure to see and to officially to meet you. Thank you for doing this with us.
Hi, James. Hi, Adam. Thank you for having me.
Well, so maybe Lynn, you could start us off with just introducing yourself and the association, maybe how you got involved, and just tell us a little bit more about who Major Taylor is.
Okay, well, I'm a cyclist, and that's how I got involved with the Major Taylor Association. We're a nonprofit based in Worcester, Massachusetts, where Major Taylor lived most of his life. And we formed in the late 1990s. Our initial goal was to put up a statue of Major Taylor here in Worcester, and we did that. It took us about 10 years to raise the money, and there he is in bronze and granite now outside the Worcester Public Library. And we've continued since then to keep trying to educate people about Major Taylor's life and legacy.
So maybe you could talk to who even Major Taylor is for those in the audience that do not know of his name and the work that you guys are doing to preserve the history of this person.
So Major Taylor was the fastest bicycle rider in the world. This was back in at the turn of the last century. He was a world champion in 1899. He set a slew of world records. He was a track rider known for his incredible sprint. And this was a black man who came up during Jim Crow, so he had to fight racial prejudice the whole way. This was probably the worst period of racial segregation in our country's history, violently enforced by lynching, and that extended through every aspect of society, including sports, including cycling. And he faced all those closed doors and open hostility with remarkable dignity and came out a winner.
Yeah, one quote that I remember reading on your site was that he would say, "Life is too short for a man to hold bitterness in his heart." It sounds like he was quite a man of dignity that also had to endure quite a bunch of challenges. So with go ahead.
That's what struck me with this story from the beginning is what a tightrope he had to walk and how he could do that and stay focused, stay determined. He said from an early age he wanted to be the fastest bicycle rider and went right through and beat every European champion, successful tours in Australia. So really, really remarkable person. And we honor him here not only for his athletic prowess, but also his strength of character. Never raced on Sunday. He was a religious man, steadfast member of the local Baptist church, and would not race on Sundays until he got big enough to get that in his contract when he went to Europe for the first time.
That's amazing.
So if I can jump in, thank you for that. Excuse me. So I wanted to ask about not just the work that you're doing, Lynn, in Worcester, but talk about the Major Taylor Association as a nationwide organization. How many chapters of the Major Taylor Organization are there across the United States?
There's been about 50 clubs. Sometimes with the club leadership comes and goes, so not all of them are active right now, but there are dozens across the United States. And so we've kind of turned into this umbrella group for Major Taylor cycling clubs. Many of the ones that use Major Taylor in the name of their club have been started by people of color and have a specific goal to promote diversity in the sport, to get more people of color into it. Another group that's sprung up in the meantime that's kind of similar is Black Girls Do Bike. And their name, of course, is a reference to the idea that, oh, black people don't do this or don't do that, but they do. So that's what, and so the Major Taylor clubs all across the country, and we're working on getting our first one overseas too. We've had a few inquiries recently.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So they're kind of like our ambassadors. They, if they have a picture of Major Taylor or the words Major Taylor Association on their jerseys when they're out riding, what they're hoping for is that people will ask them, who's Major Taylor? And then they get to pass the story on.
Yeah. And there's also, I know a few. I'm familiar with the project going down in Tulsa, and also in the Metro Atlanta Cycling Club, because there's an educational component to what they're trying to accomplish as well. So can you speak about the educational component that these organizations and these chapters have embedded into their mission?
Exactly. Well, we're primarily an educational organization to begin with, and so what some of the chapters have taken it a step beyond just riding their bikes and taking Major Taylor books and the story of Major Taylor into schools. The Atlanta one that you mentioned, they've given a lot of books to school libraries in their city. In Tulsa, they've teamed up with a bike company, and they give bikes and books. There's some programs that take Major Taylor's name that use the inspiration of this story that actually aren't even technically affiliated with us, but it's all good. For example, in Seattle, in Reno, in Philadelphia, that have earn a bike type programs where they teach kids bike repair. And it's not all just about, it's not only about getting kids on bikes. It's building confidence, building skills, setting kids on a path to success. So it's really cool that Major Taylor has just been the initial inspiration for making all these things happen.
That's fantastic. So one of the really cool things that that Major Taylor did, and what more people, I believe, need to learn about, is the 7-day race. So can you tell us about the 7-day race and Major's accomplishment during that period?
Well, it was only 6. I hate to burst your bubble. It's a 6-day race. The 6-day races were amazing. They were hugely popular at the turn of the century, and that was Major Taylor's pro debut. When he turned 18, he got his racing license, and his very first race was a 6-day in Madison Square Garden. These races were an incredible grind. You raced for 6 days straight, around the clock. You could stop whenever you want, if to have something to eat or to take a nap, but the race was won by whoever did the most miles the whole time. So, and then there were intermediate sprints to keep the crowd engaged and excited. There'd be some sprints during the race. So Major Taylor lasted that first race. He came in 8th place with something like 1,700 miles. But it was actually a curtain raiser before the 6-day clock started. On Saturday night is when they would start these races. And so it was like a little exhibition race. And so he did a half mile contest against the reigning national champion, a guy named Eddie Cannonbald, they called him. And Taylor beat him. So this was his real pro debut. So that's what really vaulted him onto the national stage. Here was a guy to watch. He never did another 6-day like that, where one every man for himself, where one man goes around the clock the whole time. In fact, when Teddy Roosevelt was governor of New York, they deemed that cruel and dangerous. So 6-day racing evolved into a format called the Madison, named after Madison Square Garden, which was 2-man tag teams. So you wouldn't have one person going all those hours. They could trade off whenever they wanted. Okay. And he did do some Madison formats later on, although even by then they didn't really go all the way around the clock. But the 6 days were popular right through the 1920s. It was kind of a jazz age thing. Hollywood celebrities would be the ones to shoot off the starting gun at the start. and they packed places like Madison Square Garden. It was big. In Major Taylor's day, baseball was not as big as cycling. Cycling was huge.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that you bring up baseball, because I know in our initial conversations, you said one of your goals is to make Major Taylor's name as synonymous with sports as Jackie Robinson.
Right, make it a household name like Jackie Robinson. You just say those two words and everybody knows who you're talking about, what he did, and why it's significant. And Major Taylor broke the color barrier in his sport 50 years before that, half a century before. So, I mean, we joke that our elevator pitch, if we only had 10 seconds to tell you who was Major Taylor, we'd say, well, the Jackie Robinson of bicycling. But it should be the other way around, right? Because right. Taylor was first. Jackie Robinson was the Major Taylor of baseball.
Yeah. Wow. So I at least from what I was seeing that you were sending over to us, Lynn, and through the website, I noticed that you're working on a number of new initiatives now. You have things like the George Street Challenge, 1 Million Miles for Justice. Could you speak to some of those current initiatives that you're working on?
Yeah, well, I'll take the second one first. 1 Million Miles for Justice is a virtual, because of the pandemic, is a virtual ride, walk, or run that's going on right now. That was started by one of our friends in Alabama. And you can bike or walk or run anywhere, anytime through July 15th and log your miles on the website. And it's $25 to register for the first 25 miles, and then you can $1,000 per mile. They're trying to get to 1 million. The proceeds benefit the NAACP with their hashtag We Are Done Dying. So it's really, really fitting for the current moment and the social justice that the United States is really trying to get back on track toward. But the real living legacy you mentioned is George Street. Mm-hmm. George Street. I'm gonna get James to come to this next year because I know he rides. I know he's a track rider.
I'm not much of a climber, but I'll see you out there.
It's a short hill. It only hurts for about 30 seconds.
I'm in. That's good. That's about as long as I can last.
Yeah, so George Street is a wicked steep hill in downtown Worcester that even when Major Taylor moved here in the middle of the 1890s, this was already known as, it's kind of like an Everest for cyclists. It's just a challenge because it's there. So he was told any cyclist worth his salt ought to be able to pedal up this hill. And it was just cobblestones then. So he went over there to try it, and a crowd formed to watch him because he was already building a name for himself. And he wrote in his autobiography that he went up and down twice in quick succession. He didn't say how fast. I don't even know if he was timed. But we do it as a time trial every July, one rider at a time against the clock. And it's a spectacle. It's a lot of fun. We get all kinds of riders. We get the Lycra-clad Euro wannabes and BMX and tandem. We've had a hand cycle. We had a unicycle. We had a guy go up with his cello on his back. Gave a little concert at the time. So you never know what's going to happen. And all ages. We have medals for different age categories, male and female. So it's that's the living legacy. We've had Major Taylor's great-great-grandson do it when he was a teenager.
Wow.
So it's a lot of fun. You could crush it, James. I bet you could crush it.
All right. I'm gonna withhold my self-judgment there. So we'll see.
I can do it. I'm not fast anymore. I'm not really a contender because there's some fast women out there, even in my advanced age group. But if I can do it, you can do it.
Fantastic. All right. I will definitely see you out there. So thank you for that. I'd like to know more about the statue, though. I know I've been to your site, and I've seen the statue, and I know that what it means to the community. But there's a story and a history behind the artist. There's the dedication process. 'Cause I think that's a very interesting story. So if you could tell us about that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, well, getting a statue was an education for me. And I was skeptical at first. I wasn't really sure what public art would accomplish if people would just, walk by this chunk of bronze and granite and not stop and read anything or understand who it was or what it would mean to people. And that's, like I said, that's been an education for me. It's become kind of a pilgrimage point. We've had various bike rides start there, bike races go past there, cyclists from all over the place come and visit it. The Badger, Bernard Hinault, 5-time Tour de France winner, came to see it, pronounced it magnifique. We had a Dutch team, a young Dutch team came to see it. Individuals from all over the country. So that's been amazing. It was created by a sculptor named Toby Mendez, who lives in Maryland. And one thing you'll notice when you look at it is that Major Taylor is not on his bike. He's standing next to his bike. And the sculptor talked about how he wanted to depict him standing tall, that it's Major Taylor, the man, not only the athlete. I mean, we're not talking about a horse race here. We're talking about a human being. So that sort of helps draw you into the whole person, who is this man standing tall next to a bike. And then on the other side of it, there's an action scene of 3 racers on the track, and Major Taylor is actually the one in the back at that moment. It's based on a photograph, a rare action shot, and that's because that's what he was famous for, was coming from behind at the very last second. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you know, James, as a track racer, how you try to line that up, and he often had to that was his go-to way of winning, because he often got blocked in and pocketed. He faced all kinds of racism and opposition, and oftentimes all the white riders would combine against him and block him in. So he had to, find an opening and dart out at the last second.
Wow,
that's a great story. And there was was it at the dedication? Very prominent figure in cycling at the dedication of the statue?
Yeah, when the statue was unveiled, this is in 2008, our keynote speaker was Greg LeMond, 3-time Tour de France winner, and he talked about how sport is hard enough, just the sport itself, never mind this whole layer of racism on top of it. So he's just in awe of Major Taylor. Our honorary national chairman is Edwin Moses, the Olympic hurdler, and he talked about how Major Taylor's name belongs in the pantheon with other African-American athletes who overcame racism. He talked about Jesse Owens and Muhammad Ali and help me out here, such a list, and so that was amazing. We had cyclists from all over the country. Tommy Smith. I'm blanking on so many of the names of other athletes in other sports. Mm-hmm. But so the statue has really become a jumping off point for a lot of conversations about race and cycling, and why is cycling still so white?
Yeah. And so speaking of on that, I know now, are you working on a high school curriculum guide? Are you?
Yeah, we have. We had some Worcester teachers write a curriculum. We have different grade levels. We have an elementary, sort of a middle level, and a high school level. And that's downloadable free for teachers and youth groups anywhere. It's been used in about 30 states that we know of. Wow. Something we need to do is start keeping better track of who's using it and what's happening with it. But yeah, we try to get kids engaged in the story and to relate it to modern times, to what's happening now. Some other topics about cycling and race that have kind of come into the conversation are equity things, like where are bike lanes and bike-friendly streets created, which neighborhoods, which communities get them, why is that, how does that work? Cycling while black, is that something that's policed differently, policed more, over-policed? There's some really good work going on in Chicago on that now. There's a group called Equiticity that's actually compiled some data on that, and I think Tampa's getting some good data on questions like that too. The League of American Bicyclists has an equity initiative that looks at these issues, especially with transportation planning. You know, a lot of cities during the previous round of urban renewal got bisected by highways and certain neighborhoods cut off, and that's a mistake nobody wants to repeat. And so all these issues of cycling and transportation and equity and race are really coming to the fore again, especially now with the pandemic that we're seeing has really laid bare a lot of inequities.
Yep. Well, that sounds like you're doing good work there. And locally in Worcester, are there any other programs or initiatives going on that you would like to see happen in your, not just your area, but just to begin in your area and kind of branch out across the country?
Well, our in Worcester, the Major Taylor Association response to the pandemic, we kind of looked around at what was happening in the community and where the urgent needs were. And so we got involved with a campaign called Connected Kids. And that has to do with the digital divide and the sudden and speedy transition to online learning that all the kids in the schools had to suddenly switch to. And not everyone even had a laptop or an internet connection. So Connected Kids was working on that, buying Chromebooks for the schools, and then some other people have joined in to help get the hotspots. So that was our immediate response, and that's not directly to do with cycling, but it's all about leveling the playing field. And that was what Major Taylor was all about. He wrote in his autobiography, I think he used the term square deal something like 30 times. And he introduced each chapter with verses that talked about a fair field and no favor. So that's kind of the bigger picture, is leveling the playing field, ensuring a fair future for everyone.
Right. And there have been a few. Well, at least I know of one children's book and two other books that were written about Major Taylor's life. Are you familiar with those, or if somebody wanted to learn more about those books, where can they access them?
Yeah, there's a bunch of really good biographies. The whole sort of renaissance of Major Taylor. The sad part of his story is that in his retirement, he was largely forgotten, and he had been one of the wealthiest blacks in America. He pulled down really big money. This is the other part to cycling being as big as baseball, or bigger than baseball, as the professionals got paid really well. So he was rich and famous. He was headlines all over the world. He was the toast of Paris. But in his retirement, he didn't have that income coming in. He made some business investments that didn't pan out. He had an illness that sapped his fortune. His marriage got strained, and he ended up dying in poverty and obscurity. He ended up buried in a pauper's grave at first, until some bicyclists who remembered him had his remains moved to a more prominent part of the cemetery. So that's a really sad part of the story. And remind me again where we were going with this.
Well, I just want to. I want in
the biographies.
In the spirit,
okay.
Yes, in the spirit of having learning more.
Yeah, so he had written his autobiography, and then a biography that came out in 1988 by Andrew Ritchie kind of started this renaissance of remembering Major Taylor. He started to be remembered again, and things have really snowballed since then. So that's a really good book by Andrew Ritchie. There's one by Todd Balfe just called Major, And there's one last year called The World's Fastest Man by Michael Cranish. There's another one, also Major Taylor in Australia, because when Richie wrote his book, pre-internet days, he wasn't able to do the Australian part of the research. And just those 2 seasons that Major Taylor did in Australia are a really interesting story by themselves. And all these books are on our website. If you go under the donate button, you'll see books and posters and jerseys, and there's even like a middle school sort of kids version of the biography. So there's definitely some good stories to be read about him. There's not a major movie yet.
Well, maybe our community will get on that.
Yeah, wasn't there something at one point? Wasn't there? I'm not sure if there was. I thought there was a movie. Maybe I think it was it a miniseries, a television miniseries?
Yeah, there was a TV movie. It was a 2-part series called Tracks of Glory.
Yes.
Not available for sale or rental anywhere. Believe me,
Wow.
We have tried.
Okay.
It was for a time available in Australia. It was made by an Australian company. You can see I think you can see the trailer for it on YouTube.
Sure.
It was a little kind of like an after-school special.
Yeah.
That tone.
Yeah.
I don't want to say Disney-fied, but yeah, I do.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So in terms of just cycling as it relates to your mission and kind of all encompassing into what's going on in today's world in our country with this sort of reckoning on race relations and equity in sport, diversity in cycling. What do you want to see? What would you like to see, and how can people get involved in helping you procure that mission?
Like I said, I would just like people to know Major Taylor's name, and to understand that this fight that people are really picking up steam with now, that it goes way back, that there's a lot of history, and that people have worked on this before. There's a sociologist named Harry Edwards who talks about waves of athlete activism, how first there was the first wave of athletes was fighting for legitimacy, then fighting for access, then fighting for dignity, and now we're in a 4th wave with like Colin Kaepernick. I think all these waves overlap, and I think you see elements of all of those struggles in Major Taylor's story, so I think it's really valuable to learn the history as we roll forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for that. And if someone watching this wants to start a chapter of the Major Taylor organization in their city or town, how can they go about that?
Well, we don't have any rules about the name of the club or the governance of the club. But if they want to be formally affiliated with us, we do ask for a monetary contribution to help keep the umbrella group going. And so they can just contact us at info@majortaylораssociation.org, and we'll send them the lowdown on that. Some cities have more than one club. Bike clubs tend to morph, split, branch off. So there's a few in Chicago. There's more than one in New York. I think we're on to our 2nd one in Atlanta now. And then, like I said, they can have Major Taylor in the name of their club or not. Some do, some don't. But we just basically ask people to be ambassadors, tell the story. The reaction that we still get, even after 20 years, when people learn about Major Taylor is, how come I never heard of this guy? Why didn't I know of this before? Right. And that's so that's what we're working on.
Okay. And Adam, do you have anything? I'll just have one more question.
I was gonna say, why do you think that is the case, Lynn? That it's taken this long for people to recognize Major Taylor's name, recognize his achievements? Why has it taken people so long, whereas other obviously people within other sports that are like Jackie Robinson got such fame and has had multiple documentaries, multiple films made about him? Why is it that Major Taylor's story has kind of been, kind of disappeared over the time?
Well, it's our sport. Our best traction has been in the world of cycling and also in the two cities where Major Taylor lived, here in Worcester, his adopted hometown, and in Indianapolis, where he grew up. So, but outside of those three circles, it's because of our sport. It's kind of a fringe sport. How many people do you know outside of cycling who even understand the Tour de France? Never mind anything below that.
Not many.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a good point.
So a lot of it had to do with the sport itself. And some of it was timing, too. I mean, he retired in 1910. He was working on his autobiography when World War I came along, took out a whole generation of young men. And then, don't forget, the car culture. Yeah. Interesting thing about that is that part of the reason he was so popular and that cycling was so popular at the time was the thrill of the speed. Automobiles and aviation were in their infancy then, and a man on a bicycle was the fastest thing going. It was just thrilling. And but then, as you know, cars became ascendant. A lot of the cyclists from his generation, himself included, got into the burgeoning automobile industry. He he ran a car tire repair shop.
Wow.
After he retired from cycling. Another famous one from that generation, in fact, this is a rider who once beat Major Taylor, was Albert Champion. Actually, he was a French immigrant, Albert Champion, who you know from Champion spark plugs. AC is Albert, AC Delco, AC is Albert Champion.
Wow.
So a lot of them got into the car business, and as you know, I mean, cyclists were the ones who had started the good roads. A lot to do with how roads were built in this country, but then it became all about the automobile and the highways.
Okay.
So I think all those things work together to really eclipse Major Taylor's story.
Mm-hmm.
Cycling's coming back now.
Yeah, definitely.
It is making a comeback, but so. To continue to tell stories like this is one of those things where I kind of label a story that needs to be told. And so how can we keep moving this forward?
I'd say just look him up. Look at MajorTaylorAssociation.org. Read about him. Watch our videos on YouTube. We're at MT1899. That's Major Taylor's initials and the year of his world championship. All kinds of videos there. You can see people going up George Street. You can see videos from the statue dedication that we talked about. You can see some little vignettes about his story and some of the pictures. Just spread the word. Tell somebody about Major Taylor. And keep it going that way, or join one of the clubs in Minnesota. You were talking about our current moment, and ever since, especially since the death of George Floyd, for example. If you go to the George Floyd Memorial in Minneapolis, you'll notice that the bike racks, there's a sign on them. You can go there by bike and park your bike, and you'll notice the bike racks have a sign that they were donated by the Major Taylor Cycling Club of Minnesota.
That's fantastic, and and that's another story that needs to be told as far as how something like that affected that cycling community, especially with protests and things like that going on. How that could affect the cycling community and people riding bikes and safety in that regard. So. That is another story that's kind of a sneak peek that we're going to be proud to tell in the coming weeks. So stay tuned for that. Mm-hmm. We hope to have Lewis on in a couple of weeks to tell us more about what's going on in Minneapolis.
Fantastic.
Okay, so I've run out of questions for now, but I know that it's something that. Again, we're going to do our best to move this initiative forward and to really help the Major Taylor Association continue to get that, to get that word out. I guess if I had one more question is, do you have a date for next year's George Street Challenge? So at least I can start training.
No, we usually go around the third Sunday in July. We usually pick the last day of the Tour de France, so we'll have to see what their schedule is.
Right. Okay.
And that's because, if you can't be in Paris, you can be here in Worcester, which was actually once known as the Paris of the 80s.
I did not know that.
Me neither.
I did not know that. All right. So, Adam, you have anything else?
Yeah, well, I was looking at some of the comments here. It looks like most people are just wanting to thank you very much for the work that you're doing, Lynn, that the association is doing. Many people are commenting that they just are grateful to learn all this information. I think that obviously putting these stories at the forefront, whatever we can do within our own community to also help pass this on, is super crucial. So thank you so much for sharing the information and for taking the time to speak with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for doing these conversations too. I think this is a really fun way for people to learn and find out what's going on.
Yeah,
really appreciate you coming on and helping us put this together relatively quickly.
Yeah.
I know we've only been in conversations for a few weeks, Lynn, and the help that you've given me and the people that we've connected with through you as a result of us connecting is going to help Pactimo as a company continue to tell this story and continue not only to educate and support, but to fight the battle that needs to be fought and level the playing field. So thank you for that. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, thank you both so much. Anybody else that might have a question, please do put it down in the comments. We'll make sure to pass that on to Lynn so that we can get a response. But again, thank you both for joining, and we'll see you guys soon, hopefully.
All right, we'll see you soon. Thank you very much, Lynn, and I'll be in touch.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Adam.